So you find us live in the second hour of the show. It's still the Power Zone on Power 98.7. Hoping that you're well wherever you are this morning as we really burn the midnight oil together on this Thursday. It's chilly outside, but we try, right? We try to warm each other up as we go all the way to the top of three. So a big thank you to everybody that has been with us. And how interesting was that topic earlier on that we brought you from the Power Talk, just looking at the syndicates around the home affairs, around passports and the likes. Really, it's a cause for concern. But I want us to move here and talk the YOBA, all right? The 16 YOBA. This will be the top 16 youth owned brand awards or brands awards. This will be the YOBA 2025. Pat Mahlangu is coming through as the founder and CEO of the top 16 youth owned brands awards. And here we see them pushing to really celebrate entrepreneurship, right? Young entrepreneurship here, driving support and ensuring that they are recognized in terms of what they have to offer. You see them playing in the economy. You see them moving to push brand SA. You see them moving as well to try by all means to bridge the gap in terms of job creation here. So this morning we're going to be talking about them, how they're going to be celebrated, and this really coming through at a time as we are reflecting on a lot that is coming out of Youth Month, right? A timely moment to reflect on both the challenges and the incredible potential of young people here in South Africa, looking at what they're continuing to do. So you at home, you're welcome to form part of this conversation as well. You find us live on 0861 987 000. Then by X we go by at Power FM 987 at Katlego Legodi _ Pat, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Katlego. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving us your time. I mean, these are exciting times. You've come far, looking at how you started there in 2022 to where we are now in 2025. And we see the YOBA really continuing to celebrate young entrepreneurship here, youth at work, and looking at all of these issues that would play themselves out in pushing for them to become main players in the economy. Let's talk about this year's installment of the YOBA.
Yes, so we are now gearing up for our fourth edition of the YOBAs, and as you mentioned earlier on, we started back in 2022, and when we started, it was just to be honest, I wasn't sure in terms of what is it that I'm getting myself into, but obviously through guidance and support from mentors, and we managed to pull off the first one. And fast forward to 2025, we are again doing this, and in the main what's happening is that this year each year, if I must say, we're building on from the progress that we made in the previous year. So last year we introduced a few sort of elements. In the main, one was expanding entries to the rest of the African continent, and two, introducing a new category called Global Excellence. So with the Global Excellence Award, it's the only award that's not contested, where the judges get to select, a young South African, either a young individual or a youth-owned brand that is doing really well on global platforms. That really positions brand South Africa in a good way.
Yeah.
So last year we had the renowned fashion designer Makuku.
Oh yeah.
Whom, if you can Google his work, and whose clothes has been worn by some of the most famous people in the world, be it actors and actresses and politicians and people of really high stature, but not only because his clothes have been donned by or worn by um, famous people, but I mean, you'll find his work at the Metropolitan Museum in New York. He showcased on big platforms like the Paris Fashion Week. He truly is the embodiment of what we call youth excellence.
Mm.
So, that's a very special award,
Yeah.
and this year that award it goes to the fastest man in the world. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about.
And
You know,
do you wanna give it away already? Do you wanna give it away already in terms of how we really are going to be barking? Because I was gonna go in there to say to
yeah.
you that who then do we find as players then as we go into the
Uh-huh.
year 2025? And I'm seeing that you're already giving it away. But these are
Yeah.
exciting times, when pet. These are really
Yeah.
exciting times because we see you moving as well and beyond the SA borders into the continent and globally. That is commendable. But I want us to backtrack a bit and just help our listeners here to understand what the YOBAs would be and how, I know you said that, it was crazy when you started in 2022 because you didn't know what you were getting yourself into. But for someone that is listening to us right now and just asking themselves as to what are the YOBAs, what are we talking about here, and how do we then, link it with what this guy has said that they're introducing new categories. Last year they introduced Africa and they moved into the global excellence, but of what? Let's bring them in.
Yeah. So the Yobas, as young people now call them, because when I started, I always insisted that it's the top 16 youth-owned brands awards. You know, but the the people that we created the platform for say, no, it's too long, Pat. Let's just call it the Yobas. I was
Hmm.
like, okay,
It
let's
goes
go with
with
it.
Ayoba, so it rhymes with Ayoba,
Aha,
Yobas.
aha. So the Yobas is a platform, is the only platform in the continent that recognizes brands that are owned and run by young people. And by young people, referring to obviously the youth persons between the ages of 18 and 35. So the reason why I started the Yobas is that they were born out of my two passions. One is the youth development. So I've always been someone who lifts as I rise, particularly other young people. And secondly is brands. So I'm a marketer by profession and also by trade. So combining those two passions, that's how the Yovas came into being.
Oh,
And and the platform has obviously over the years sort of evolved and have now become, a much sought after, I'd say, accolade for young people. And the reason why I say that, every now and then, be it when I'm given platforms to speak, or just even at the shopping mall, and I meet someone that recognizes me, they will say, Pat, I am growing and building my brand so that one day I can win a Yoba. And one may also ask, why does brand matter? Why are brands important? So brands um, create industries, and industries create jobs, and jobs, as we know, have a huge impact in our economy. So when someone looks at a brand builder, they are looking at someone who's a nation builder. Because when we start playing in the brand space, we start playing in the long term. Even the mindset shifts from just being it's just running a business that's very transactional, day-to-day type of thinking to more sort of long-term legacy.
Yeah.
If you look at a nation like, for example, the United States, I always say it's a classic case of a nation that understands branding, that is not only branded itself as a nation,
Mm.
uh, but also is stronger because of the brands that they build. Almost every most people have never been to the U.S., but they know a Made in America brand,
You
at
know.
least at least five,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
across industries, right?
Yeah.
So brands also contribute, to the image of a country.
Yeah.
So when we start thinking about brand and start taking uh, brand seriously, it we are also increasing our competitive advantage um, in the world.
I wanted to just get a sense of how then they get to show up. Do you
Mm.
get to track them in terms of the traffic that is directed at them? Do you get to track them in terms of their reach, maybe in terms of where they find themselves or where you find them? How do you get to see them making the cut? And do you then look at, these brands maybe in tech? Do you look at a brand in media? Do you look at a brand maybe in retail? And how then in the banking sector? What categories do we get in the YOBAs? And how do they actually get to show up and get to make that cut?
Yeah. So our criteria is, so we've got two sets of criteria. There's one that obviously gets you through the door, and there's one that gets you recognized.
Mm.
So the one that gets you through the door is that we say the brand must have been around for 12 months and longer. The business then must be registered with the CIPC,
Mm.
and it must be owned and run by a young person. And in terms of categories, as the name suggests, 16, top 16.
Mm.
So we have 16 categories. And when we came up with the categories, obviously we looked at the various sectors of the economy, and also we're deliberate in terms of obviously, you know, choosing um, the sectors that we already know that young people are active in, because otherwise, it would really sort of defeat the purpose. So what the sectors that we have, they range from agriculture, apparel, education and literature, the creative and arts, media, you mentioned earlier on, technology, services, travel and tourism,
Mm.
um, manufacturing. Um, so those are in the main some of the categories um, that we have. So then the judges would then have a criteria number two, which speaks to, looks at things like consistency in the application of the brand identity. You know, I'm sure sometimes if you've ever dealt with a small business, never mind sort of a youth-owned business,
Mm.
sometimes you'd find that on Facebook they use this color or this particular logo.
Yeah.
On Instagram, it's a different color. On their website, it's a different
Mm.
color or different element, which then creates some sort of confusion in terms of you ask yourself, am I dealing with the same business here? You know,
Mm.
because brands, great brands, are built on consistency.
Yeah.
Consistency, you know, in the use of what we call the brand elements. Be it the color, the font, the logo,
Mm.
in some cases, audio, logos, or what we call mnemonics.
Mm.
You know, if I say to you, Yellow Summer, which brand comes to mind? You know,
Yeah.
those are some of the elements that we then sort of look at.
Ah,
Then,
and I wanted to come in there and just check into, the last year. Let's maybe take it back to last year to say who then were the big winners, so we can give our listeners an idea of, who then we are likely to see making somewhat of a feature in the top 16 this year. Last year, which brands and do we then see a brand maybe making a return? If maybe last year Mike Khosa was a big winner, and they're still doing great, and they've even gained made strides in the previous year. Do you see them still having another chance to make a return, or if you've had your share, you are then counted amongst those that have made it, and then you find that the person then moves along as it goes?
yeah, so we avoid repeats because sometimes ultimately, you might end up having the same winners every year. So what we often do, I mean, what we always do is that we don't if yes, you can be a young person, but maybe you run multiple brands. But if one specific brand has won, it can't win um, twice. So some of the previous winners, include the likes of uh, Young Baba, which is a a, a business in the powering space founded by a young Lemore who's now 25, but has already opened 4 retail outlets and barber shops. They do very well. The likes of Karabo Poppy from a creative and arts perspective. There's Do Sneaker Cleaners, which is a business in the sneaker cleaning space, which 2 years ago, when load shedding was rife. So this is a Soweto based business. I think they're based in Orlando, where during the what do they call it, load shedding, um, when the power once went off, and when it came back forcefully, and ultimately causing fire in his establishment, and burning down some of the shoes that were there, and it was really a devastating moment for this young entrepreneur, and and he mobilized support, and also I in my personal capacity, I helped him, contributing to his comeback, and it was then. Fast forward 2 years later, the brand came back stronger than before, and they ultimately won a YOBA. And and those are the kind of stories that you hear. There's Optimum Poultry that operates that's in the agricultural space. They do poultry farming and they sell eggs. They have a farm in the Makhalif side, location-wise. So those are some of the brands and the stories, that you hear. Robot Boy, also from an influencer, content creator category perspective, also won big last year, not only winning the top personality and influencer brand, but also taking home, the overall top brand. And one may ask, personality, can they be a brand? I'm not sure how exposed you are, to the influencer creator world.
Yeah, is it about the numbers?
Yeah, not only just the numbers, but also from a an economic perspective. An average influencer, and I mean, when we say average, an average good one, you know, um, employs about 5 people. If it's a female, the number even goes even higher because they oftentimes they require a stylist and they also require makeup artist and someone who does their hair, you know, and and outside of their manager, because most of them now have managers, they have you know sort of they employ drivers, they have full-time photographers and videographers that they work with. So the influencer economy is one that's also thriving and also that creates opportunities for young people to be economically um, active.
Oh, nice. And I wanted to just gauge in terms of the level of the work that they do on the ground. Do you then tend to check in terms of the number of people that they employ, in terms of a
Yeah.
brand's reach, and how then they are doing in terms of some of them maybe even finding themselves knocking at the doors of the stock exchange if they are to have that much of power and influence? And I wanted to also gauge as to how would opportunities like the Africa Free Continental Trade Area, help in pushing some of these brands to penetrate the continent, to go into the globe as well? Do you look at their reach in terms of that aspect, and do we see an opportunity here coming through the Africa Free Continental Trade space?
Yes, I mean the Africa free trade agreement or AFCTA. It's a very important aspect, but one that also on one end, I think um, demands a lot of work on the side of the of the commission that sits there in terms of the involvement of young people. I like the fact that you also mentioned the continent and the reason why we're expanding. I mean, to the rest of the continent is that Africa is a fairly young continent. You know, the median age of the African population is 19 years old. You know, 70% of Africa's population is under the age of 30. So it's a very young continent, and that if we ignore, you know, the participation, the economic participation of young people, we are really our future. So the intra-Africa trade, and what I like about I'd say, for lack of a better word, my peers and those that are younger, that are coming up, to collaborating with other African or other African young people, you know, from a business perspective, from a creative creativity perspective. So the programs or platforms like the AFCTA then become very important in terms of just making sure that, you know, it is easier for a South African, for example, you know, to get their products and services into Kenya and vice versa. Because ultimately there needs to be a sort of a balance, a balance of trade, you know, between all the African nations. And that, you know, obviously, ultimately, you know, changing also the perception, you know, of the African continent. And as you may know, you know, unfortunately, I say this unfortunately, you know, I mean, the average age of an African leader, you know, is 70 plus, you know, and I mean, I saw a video of, I think, is it someone 90 something or a very frail man, you know, running again for the Ugandan presidency. And, you know, sometimes you can't help but just, you know, be a bit disappointed You know, when we have a young continent that that's vibrant, or young people that are vibrant, that are ambitious, that are full of ideas, but somehow they are put on the margins of the economy. You know,
How are they doing though? I asked about some of them maybe having even those ambitions to go onto the stocks exchange. Do you see them having that potential? How are they doing? Are you looking at how many people they get to employ? I mean, we do have a crisis
yeah,
of youth unemployment in the country right now. So as you go
yeah,
into searching for these top 16, do you also
yeah,
look at the influence that and the change that they tend to bring? Through their brand, looking at the
yeah.
socioeconomic challenges that we're experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that you asked that question, and I said, you know, to the other day to one of my friends, I said, you know, I think I have hope. I think what we're gonna be seeing in the next 5 years or less, there's gonna be a time or a wave where we see, you know, if by the time maybe that happens, some of these brands, or I mean the brand owners, may no longer be youth, but we'll see what I call, in my view, you know, my generation from an entrepreneurial slash business perspective. I'd say they are the first pure entrepreneurs. So what I mean, especially in the post um, apartheid era. I mean, obviously, we know stories of ingenuity of black people that started businesses, like the likes of the late Tate Maponya, the late and Tate Sam Matsuenyane, you know, who started the likes of African Bank under, you know, really harsh conditions, right? But then again, as we entered the democracy, right, what we saw or what we are seeing is that, you know, then we entered the wave of what I call the BE, you know, where people got into business um, through BE deals, you know, and obviously they amassed a a lot of wealth in the process. But now what you are seeing is young people who are entering into business by choice and also by, you know, solving sort of real tangible problems, and obviously ultimately, you know, amassing um, wealth in the process. So the next wave, we've seen young people that they are capable of starting from scratch, you know, from the ground up. We hear stories of a brand like Deliver Speed, for example, that started off, you know, with bicycles, and today they are a proper, fully fledged logistics company with warehouses in Johannesburg, Polokwane, and Cape Town, and they have a fleet of close to 50 um, vehicles, and they employ hundreds, you know, of young people.
Yeah.
And this is within a period of 3 years, mind you,
This is
right?
just something that is commendable. We
Yeah,
out of time when I'm pet. I want you to give us the details in terms of where are these awards taking place. How can people form part of them? If there are then opportunities as well, still for them to throw their names in the hat. Do you open up a category period that closes where people can, you know, more or less try to throw their names in the hat there for those that
yeah,
maybe want to form part of the 16 in the coming year? Maybe just
yeah.
give us a sense of how they can form part of the 16 and the details, just briefly around when and where and how then, you know, these awards will be happening.
Yes, unfortunately for this year, you know, they cannot partake anymore. The awards. This is a campaign. This is a 7 months campaign that starts, you know, at the beginning of the year, and obviously we call for the public to nominate and to enter, and there's the shortlisting and judging and voting. So we are through all those phases. Right now, we are gearing up for the ultimate event where we announce, the winners for 2025. And that event is happening this coming Saturday, 21 June in Sandton, and tickets are available on the YOBA website, which is www.top16yoba.co.za, and they can get their tickets there, and just to join in youth celebration. And of course, if they want to participate in 2026, they just need to stay true to our social media platforms, which are Top 16 YOBA or Top 16 on Brands Awards. You can find our pages easily if you go to any of the social media pages and just search for that. Then we'll obviously announce the dates and the criteria and all the relevant information that you need. But I must say though, I want to encourage anyone who's interested in business, who's interested in the story, of progress or progressive young people and young people who are striving, for excellence, young people who are lifting as they are rising, to join us, in the celebration.
Yeah. Pat, really appreciate it, man. Thank you very much for giving us your time. Everything of the best to the brands that will be recognized there, but also for those that would be looking at forming part of this in the coming years, and the changes that these brands are making out there. It is really something that is moving, and changing the socioeconomic challenges on the ground. So thank you very much for giving us your time.